these coring activities, we go out in the field, we have a big sledgehammer, bang them into the ground, extract them and cut them open. It's kind of like opening up a present, right? You don't know what you're going to get, and it's really exciting. And I think the students get a really good experience and training in, the sedimentology and also coastal processes from those types of field experiments.
Welcome to Shaping Shores, the Centennial podcast of the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. For 100 years, ASBPA has united people across science, policy, and practice to preserve U.S. shores and beaches. If you are listening, you should be one of these people. Become a member or make a gift today at asbpa.org. I'm your host, Nicole Elko, ASBPA's Executive Director. And today we continue our ongoing series with ASBPA's Coastal Champions, discussing how we're shaping the shores of tomorrow. I'm honored to be joined by Tiffany Roberts Briggs, Chair and Associate Professor of Geosciences at Florida Atlantic University, based in Boca Raton, Florida. Tiffany's been involved with ASBPA for nearly 20 years and is now the Vice President of Science and Technology. Tiffany, welcome. Thanks so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're all excited to hear your story today. We've been hearing from some of our other guests about how they managed to find this kind of elusive career in coastal geology. So what is your story?
Yeah, it's a fun story, I think. I grew up loving the beach. It was one of my favorite things to do. I spent many days hanging out at the beach in high school and in the early days of college. And so I was actually pursuing my Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science in the Honors College at the University of South Florida. And it was time to pick a thesis topic that semester. And I was taking a couple different classes. I was in organic chemistry, calculus 2, and then this class called Beaches and Coasts. And so no offense to the chemists and mathematicians out there, but that wasn't really my jam. And so I approached my instructor, Dr. Ping Wong, and I said, hey, do you have a thesis topic for me? I'm interested in doing some research. And he did. And so I joined the team. I picked up a project looking at some wave tank data and limits of wave runup causing beach and dune erosion. But at the same time, we had just experienced the 2004 hurricane season, which is pretty infamous for the impacts that it made on many different areas. And so I actually joined the field team, capturing some of the post-storm damages, and I was hooked. It was amazing. It was nothing like I'd ever seen. Just being out on those beaches and seeing the impacts, I was like, this is what I have to do.
Yes. Well, we have that in common. So we did overlap there sort of in USF for a little bit when I was not really in the lab anymore, but, getting my PhD. So it was fun to see you there. And yeah, those 2004 hurricane seasons. So let's talk a little bit about that. Charlie, Francis, Ivan, Jean. And so what did you learn about kind of the way that beaches respond and recover?
Yeah, I mean, they hit different parts of the coast, and I think that was really the first time I thought about, coastal variability and the variability in coastal geomorphology and geology. The sediments are different, the beach widths, the, dune type, and so, those aspects really became apparent to me in terms of storm impacts. I was mostly working in the Panhandle, helping collect morphology data, and we were looking at overwash deposits, but also characterizing just the structural damages and the, damages to, this beautiful extensive dune system. It looked so different, but, some of the impacts from those storms on, say, Florida's East Coast, they looked a lot different. Those beaches, don't have the same extensive dune systems, and they're much more developed. And so it was really eye-opening. And, the start of thinking about, hey, wait, not all beaches are the same.
Okay. Yes. Great observation. And we were trained to do a lot of observing as coastal geologists. So you got this taste of coastal geology and you're hooked. So what next? You have a PhD today. So what was the next step in the journey?
So I stayed working at USF and completed my master's and PhD in geology. My master's work was pretty similar along the lines of what I had started diving into as an undergrad with wave run up. But then for my PhD work, spent many, many weekends, capturing nourishment changes, post-nourishment, equilibration, and evolution across the Pinellas County beaches, which Nicole, I know you're very familiar with. But I also had the opportunity to integrate some research looking at mixed sand and gravel beaches up along the Delaware coast. What started out initially was sort of looking at, gravels in the swash zone, morphed into this amazing opportunity to look at, again, another type of storm impact and recovery where the remnants of a nor'easter kind of collided, the remnants of a hurricane collided with a nor'easter, and that storm impacted the study area pretty dramatically. And so, continued looking at that coast and how it evolved, totally different, sediment type and again, beach type, and how long it took for those beaches to recover naturally, which was fun. It was a really good experience. And then um, I took a instructor position at Louisiana State University in the Department of Geology and Geophysics, which is a really great experience, mostly teaching, but one of my PhD advisors, Dr. Jack Paleo, invited me to do some research in Cesal, Mexico, which I jumped on the opportunity. It sounded great. And I think it kind of just really reminded me that I love it all, right? My heart's with the research and the teaching. And, I wanted to do something that integrates both, which, for many of you realize that's sort of a tenure track professor position. And there was a job posting for a coastal geomorphologist at Florida Atlantic University, and the timing seemed right. And believe it or not, I actually grew up pretty close to here. So it worked out. And I've been at FAU since 2014.
Amazing. What a great story, taking you all over the country and beyond to so many different beaches. So we're going to talk now more about kind of what you're doing today, training students, some of the field work. So before we get into that, give us a feel for the region of work there in Boca, what it feels like when you go out to the beach to collect your data.
Yeah, the beaches here they're very beautiful. We have nice, mixed siliciclastic and carbonate beaches. A lot of our sand is eroded from nearby coquina outcrops. So it's a really fun sort of mix of, sediment sources with different geologic types. Sometimes the beaches are, wide and healthy and backed by nice vegetated dunes. Sometimes they're a little bit eroded and need some help. Down here in South Florida, we're pretty developed. So behind our beaches and dunes tend to be structures or roads. And so, yeah, when we're out collecting data, we're usually looking to, collect sediment samples or morphology data. Some of the things we've started doing is deploying other types of sensors. But anytime we're out at the beach, there are always plenty of curious beachgoers that want to walk up and ask us what we're doing. And it's always a, fun interactive experience collecting data here in South Florida.
Excellent. Yeah, we've got some great photos of you doing a number of different things here on the beaches with your students. So tell us a little bit about some of the CSL fieldwork photos that you've shared with us here on the screen now.
Yeah, so the Coastal Studies Lab conducts a lot of different types of projects. We primarily work on the beach side, but we do have some projects that have been emerging on the back barrier, looking at living shorelines. A lot of our work focuses on, storm impacts or storm recovery, and that's not just, from tropical storms or like major hurricanes, but also, cold fronts can cause quite a bit of change on our beaches. So we usually have ongoing projects looking at those types of things. Nourishment, performance, and post-nourishment equilibration is still of great interest. So we often are out, helping monitor what nourishment projects are doing and how they're evolving. As I mentioned, we've had a couple of projects looking at living shorelines lately and kind of just trying to understand the, evolution of the sedimentology and the morphology and adjacent environments. And then also we've started to sort of, look at impacts of the beach habitat on nesting sea turtles. In particular, trying to understand that relationship of the environment on temperature. Temperature is one of the determinations for the sea turtle gender. And so that's, pretty important that we understand, is there something with the morphology? Is there something with, the wave run up, and is that cooling the nest? Is it something with the sediment? Is that influencing the temperature? As my colleague here at FAU likes to cold dudes, hot chicks. So we really kind of want to make sure that we're working in an interdisciplinary nature with other researchers to, make sure that the environment is conducive for, healthy outcomes for those species. So that's kind of a smattering of the different types of projects that we've been working on here over the last 10 years or so.
Very cool. So, yeah, a lot of interdisciplinary work there, like with the biologists for sea turtle nesting. So you said something cool dudes, hot chicks. Tell us, explain that one to our listeners. What does that mean?
Yeah, so there's I mean, this is where my collaborators come in. That's their area of expertise. But the idea is that the temperature of the substrate is going to determine, whether the hatchlings are male or female. And so there's a lot of work going into, finding what that threshold is and finding, what the, spatiotemporal variability is that might be influencing different temperatures across beaches in space or even across different seasons. So, at a certain threshold of temperature or below that threshold, you'll produce male hatchlings. And then if you exceed that threshold, you'll produce female hatchlings. And there's been a lot of research that shows that the beaches are getting warmer. And so hatchlings, the percentage that are female have been increasing over the years. So.
Fascinating, fascinating. All right, and then you're out there on the beach, you're doing all this field work, great field work with students. You mentioned that there are some curious beachgoers. So, what do they think you're doing, and what do you have to clarify the work?
Um, I would say more often than not, they think we're there for the sea turtles. That's our charismatic megafauna. Everybody loves sea turtles. But it's a really it's a conversation starter. They'll come up and say, "Hey, are you, looking for sea turtle nests?" And we say no. And sometimes we are doing work that's part of those collaborative projects. And, we'll mention like, "Hey, we're actually out here, measuring the beach. We're collecting, elevation data and sampling the sediment and, you know, collecting data that can help with sea turtle conservation." But sometimes they'll ask, "Hey, what are you doing out here? Let me tell you what I've been experiencing every day I come to this beach," or, ask questions about things like beach nourishment even.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're near Delray Beach, right? That's one of our famous poster childs for the success of nourishment over time. When the road was falling into the water right back in the 70s. So, do you feel like that's kind of a common story across South Florida?
I think probably amongst our colleagues that might be true, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily true from the public's perspective. And I think Delray is one of those beaches that I mentioned to folks when they're asking about like, why do we nourish beaches? It's like this has been a tremendously successful project, and as of today and this taping, they're in the middle of another nourishment project. And so just a few weeks ago, we were out on the beach, and again, some folks came up and were asking about all of it. And I had that opportunity to say, yeah, you guys are standing on one of, really highly successful beach nourishment programs. And that's why this beach looks so amazing, long term. And that's what, these folks are out here doing, is making sure that Delray stays, with those healthy, wide beaches. And so it's nice to point to those types of success stories, especially for the general public, because they look around, they go, "Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. That's fantastic. Keep up the great work."
Right. And that's, of course, the point of ASBPA's Best Restored Beach Award, which Delray, of course, has been awarded with before, just to make people aware that the beach that you're enjoying actually does have bulldozers come to it once every 5 years or so and fix it up. And Tiffany, you've been instrumental in kind of helping ASBPA communicate those kind of things to the public, particularly with your role in the science and technology side of the house. So, do you have some examples you want to share from that work?
Yeah, I would say the Science and Technology Committee in 2017 published a white paper that is basically saying what to expect after beach nourishment. And the paper details that post-nourishment equilibration process of, we're expecting some of the sand to naturally move into the near shore, right? That's by design to create more of a natural beach shape, and that's been a paper that I've drawn on countless times. One of I think my earliest activities was science and technology, but one that I'm really really proud of because I think it does help convey the science and the engineering to a broader audience. And so even on the beach talking to, the public, I'll use examples from that paper, and I, use it in countless classes when we're talking about beach nourishment. So I think that's been a really great outcome from science and technology, all the way up through, another paper. So that white paper is co-authored with you, Nicole, and then we have another one that we published a couple years ago that was a century of U.S. beach nourishment. I think that's been another really, you know, um, proud paper that we were able to, convey the science of nourishment.
Yes, I agree. And we also really value the work that you've done in training the next generation. Like we talked about your teaching already and your field work, but as a geologist, you end up doing a lot of coring and sampling, like you said, the substrates. And we have some photos here of you with the students in the lab. So tell us a little bit about like what is this tube of sand that you're looking at here?
Uh, so coring is one of my favorite field activities. I actually think a lot of my students have fallen in love with it too. What we do is we'll take a aluminum pipe and try to drive that pipe into the substrate, right? So the sediment below where you're standing, and extract a sample that helps you kind of look at how sediment has changed over time. And a lot of that work has been looking at storm deposits and, trying to identify, you know, places that might be more vulnerable than others, and like what the sediment might look like, and the implications, right, for organisms that use the beach. There's also implications certainly for the morphology and the slope that's linked to grain size. More recently, we've actually started some projects looking at microplastics in the sediments in the substrate and quantifying, how deep do those go and what's the sort of preservation potential of those from storm deposits. So these coring activities, we go out in the field, we have a big sledgehammer, bang them into the ground, extract them and cut them open. It's kind of like opening up a present, right? You don't know what you're going to get, and it's really exciting. And I think the students get a really good experience and training in, the sedimentology and also coastal processes from those types of uh, field experiments.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the microplastics thing is so fascinating. When you're just saying that, I was thinking about, and for our listeners, cores and looking down in the layers of sediment is how we've learned so much about the past on the Earth, right? Like the extinction of the dinosaurs. We can find that in the record. So how crazy is that to think fast forward centuries and that the future us are going to be finding microplastics in their cores. That's wild.
It is wild.
And it's also something that kind of shows us how much our field has evolved. The coastal practice has evolved since we started, even. And so technology has evolved too. And you've shared this amazing video of a drone that you use in your field work. So tell us about the technology advancements you're leveraging.
Yeah, so that's another collaboration with one of my colleagues here at FAU. And so a lot of the storm impact research, we have started integrating that more cutting edge technology where we can deploy, unmanned aerial vehicles or drones and collect aerial imagery and collect, elevation data to create maps that we then actually integrate with what I would say is still like the tried and true boots on the ground methods of, traditional surveys and photographs and, taking those sediment samples. So yeah, I think it's been really cool to be able to continue methods that have been used for a long time, but then also integrate some of this new technology and really expand the scope of the types of questions you can ask and the time it might take to rapidly assess coastal change.
Yeah. For sure. Well, we all appreciate that you are still doing that and lending this knowledge to the next generation of coastal leaders. So, what is it that you share with them? You know, you're putting the capping down on one of your students. What's your advice when you send them off into the world?
I hope that they stay lifelong learners, stay curious, keep, pursuing the science and, learning from each other and colleagues and really find the value in having a good network. Uh, you know, I think that that's really important in our field to build those relationships and maintain them over time because I think you can solve a lot of problems when we put our heads together.
Absolutely. And hopefully ASBPA has been one of those networks for you and for many others to come.
Yes, it has. Absolutely. About almost 20 years and counting.
The coastal champion, Tiffany Roberts Briggs, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for today's episode of Shaping Shores. I'm Nicole, and thanks so much for spending part of your day with us. If today's conversation inspired you, help us continue this work. Become a member or make a gift at asbpa.org. To hear more stories from the people preserving U.S. coasts, follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Together, we're shaping a resilient future for our nation's beaches and shores. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again on next week's episode.